Hey guys, this is Carrie, and in this video we're going to add some bad guys to the game. Alright, so I'm going to go over to the JavaScript file, and you would think that adding bad guys might be complicated, but it's going to be very similar to when we added the food, in combination with how our player moves. So let's see how we can combine this information to simply add some bad guys. So the same way that we created a foods list here, I'm going to create a bad guys list down here. And I guess I'm just going to do it before the set interval loop here. So maybe I'll do a comment and I'll just do something like bad guys. All right, so I'm going to call my list of bad guys plural. You can call it whatever you want. I think a common name for bad guys is mobs, M-O-B-S, but I'm silly. I'm just going to call it bad guys. So I'm going to say create bad guy as the name of the function. So now this create bad guy function hasn't actually been created, but at the beginning of the game, maybe I'm just going to put 2 bad guys, and then it will build up from there. So to create a bad guy, I'm going to go here to create food function, and I'm going to copy and paste it. So to create food, it does these things. I'm going to change the name here to create bad guy. Let's see what needs to change. So I want my bad guys to actually be able to move around. So I'm going to give my bad guys not just an X and Y coordinate, but similar to the player, an X speed and a Y speed. So I'm going to try to generate a random number from -2 to 2. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the Y speed. Okay, let new bad guy info equal. Now the array that's going to represent the bad guy's motion is going to have an X, Y, here and here, but then it's also going to have those other numbers, X speed and Y speed, as part of the array as well. And then what I'm going to say is bad guys, that array that we made up here, we're going to push onto that, which means add onto this array the new bad guy info, which is this 4-part array that represents all the key information about our bad guys. Okay, that looks good. Next up, we're going to draw our bad guys. So I'm going to copy and paste the draw food function. Told you it was going to be really similar to drawing food. Or to creating the food. It's so similar. We're just copying and pasting a bunch. So let's see. So for draw food, we're going to change the name to draw bad guy. We're going to update this based on not the food info, but the bad guy info. I'm going to make the fill style of the bad guy completely black, like a cannonball or something going across the screen. I'm going to begin a path, and then I'm going to make the CTX arc equal to not food info here, but bad guy info 0 and bad guy info 1. I'm going to shrink down the radius here to 15 so that the bad guy characters look a little different from the food on the screen, even for somebody that was colorblind. I think that probably I could improve this by making the draw bad guy more complex. So this is a great opportunity to incorporate some of your drawings from your previous projects, or to just spend some time styling it. Maybe you can give them like a really toothy mouth so that the bad guys look evil or something. Maybe you can make the foods look like actually apples or something. But for me, I'm just going to keep it simple in this video. But the process to designing a more complicated bad guy here would be to do something like we did for the draw player, where we had a whole bunch of shapes that were all being drawn. Okay, let me just move this over because it's starting to get hard to see. All right, so let's see. Bad guy info 0, so create a circle at x and y coordinates from the bad guy info. Radius, all looks good there. Now the last bad guy function that we're going to need, I'm going to go up to the player function, which is the update player one. So I'm going to grab update player. Because the food doesn't move, there wasn't an update food. So I'm going to do function update bad guy. This is going to take in a single bad guy info. Okay, similar to the player, I'm just going to do a multi-select here. So I'm going to highlight one of these, and I'm going to do a command D to bounce through all of these. I'm actually just going to do it for all of them. And I'm going to change this to bad guy info. And so that's actually, I think, pretty nice. It looks like now the way that the player moves, which is to add, sorry, just give me 1 second while the screen resizes properly. The way that the player moves is it says the new x value each frame will be the old x value plus the x speed. The new y speed will be equal to the old y speed plus the y, or the new y position will be equal to the old y position plus the y speed. I hope I said that right for both of those. But our bad guy is also going to Pac-Man for now and disappear through the edges. So I think everything is ready for us to go. If we refresh, we'll see absolutely nothing different happen on our screen. Let's see if we get any error messages though. Oh, I always do that wrong. Okay, here we go. So it just takes a minute to load up the console here. All right, so nothing is loading on our screen in terms of errors, but there are no bad guys. And the reason why is we haven't incorporated this bad guy information into the set interval function yet. So I'm going to grab this foods for each, and then I'm going to modify it for the bad guys. So I copied and pasted it. Let me add a comment here so it's easy to see. Bad guy stuff. Now, I hate the way that the copy and paste works here usually, but it looks like it actually kept my indentation. Sweet. All right, I'm going to keep making this. Okay, there we go. So instead of draw food, oh no, wow, we have to go all the way back here. So we want to go into the bad guys list, which is the plural one, because it contains all the bad guys. For each of those, each item in the list is going to be that 4-part array called bad guy info. Now we want to draw each bad guy using the bad guy info. I'm going to comment out this get distance part. Actually, yeah. Let me comment out this get distance part, and then we'll come back to that. So to comment that all out, I hovered over it, or I selected all of it, and then I did command /, and that will toggle comments on and off. / is the same key as question mark. All right, so the reason why I'm commenting this out is I don't want to worry about killing the player yet. I just want to make sure the bad guys are being drawn. I also noticed that something is missing because the food doesn't move. We don't have this like update part for food, but I'm going to add that update part in now. So the same way that the player updates and then draws, I'm going to update each bad guy and then draw it. So update bad guy, I think was the name of our function, and it requires also the bad guy info. Let's see if that does it. So right now, if this works, it'll be amazing, because I never programmed anything right on the first try, but we should have two bad guys floating around the screen. Oh my gosh, we do. And one of them's moving, the other's not. I think the reason why the other one is not moving is because its speeds are 0, so we can fix that. But let's just see. Let me refresh it. Yep, both of them are moving this time. Now only one of them is moving. And the issue with this is it can generate both the speeds to be random numbers that are 0, actually, because our random numbers are from -2 to 2. it could accidentally be 0 for both. So we can change that. Let's just see. Okay, it looks like, okay, awesome. So refreshing it a handful of times shows that it's not always having one that's stuck. All right, but you'll notice that if one of the cannonballs hits the player, it still doesn't do anything. So there's a couple of things for us to do. We can improve our create bad guy function, and we can cause a game over. So I think we're going to go with the game over part first. So that has to do with the distance here. So what we're going to do is the same way that we were telling if we were eating the food, which is about finding out if our distance is less than a certain value, we should eat the food. We're going to say, get the distance between the player and each of the bad guys. So I'm going to highlight this inside of the for each loop for the bad guys. And then it's going to get the distance using that function that we wrote above that calculates the distance formula. Because both these are highlighted using Command D, the multi-selector, I can just type bad guy info once, and it should put it both there. So we get the distance between the player and each of these. Now, if the distance is less than 45, oh, let me uncover those. So that's uncommented. I highlighted it and pressed Command question mark or Command slash. I'm going to say, because the bad guys are smaller, I'm going to say if the distance is less than 35, then what we're going to do is we're not going to remove the food. So I'll delete that. We're not going to add to our score. And we're not going to create a new food. What we're going to do is if the distance is less than 35, we're going to end the game. So to end the game, I'll do a console.log game over. And we're going to improve our game over screen next video. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to say log into the console that we got a game over. And then we'll clear this interval here. So we're going to give it a name, which is a common a name for an interval that repeats here to run the game is called the game loop. So I'm going to say that the name of the interval here is game loop. So I'm going to say let game loop equal this interval. So then if one of the cannonballs hits us, I'm going to do clear interval. And I hope this works because I don't really remember this code. And then the name of the interval I want to stop repeating here is called game loop, because that's what we just decided to call this interval. So basically, if one of the black cannonballs hits us, then we will clear our game interval, or sorry, clear our game loop, which will stop this loop from repeating, hopefully. All right, here we go, testing it. Boom, game over, and the game is over. All right, so there's a couple more things to improve with our bad guys. For me, the game is too easy right now. As we go through eating food, I feel like the game should get more difficult. So either the bad guys should speed up, which is one option, or you can make it so that the bad guys increase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say every time we eat a piece of food, not only should we create a new food, so here, if the distance is less than 45, we eat the food. Don't just create a new food, also create a new bad guy. So to do that, we'll just write here, create bad guy. So now every time we eat a food, it should run that create bad guy function here, which will generate some new bad guy info for the bad guys list, so that in the future, when we draw the bad guys and update them, it will include this new one with it. So let's go through and make sure that checks. Whoa. Okay, now we've got 3 bad guys. Sick. Okay, we've got a whole bunch of bad guys floating around. The game is getting a lot harder. All right, it's time to dodge those. And, okay, awesome. So there's a bunch of ways that you can modify this with the bad guys. Maybe you want the bad guys to not Pac-Man through the walls. Maybe you want the bad guys to bounce off of the walls. Maybe you want to have different kinds of bad guys that do different things. But I think that the bad guys are starting to look pretty complete. Now there are some things I'm a little bit worried about with our create bad guy function. I don't want any of my bad guys to stand still. So I'm going to solve the 2 problems that I have with the bad guys using some similar code. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into the create bad guy function, and I'm going to say, okay, try to generate all of these coordinates, or all this information, x, y, x speed, and y speed. And then I want to check to make sure that the bad guy is moving. Make sure every bad guy moves. So to make sure that every bad guy moves, what I can do is I can say, well, the x speed is 0, and the y speed is 0. So if both of those things are 0, well, so for as long as both of these are 0, try again. Generate a new random number to be x, and a new random number to be y. And so what will happen is it tries to generate a random number for the x speed and y speed. In the case that both of them are 0, I don't want to just check this once and then have the possibility that the new ones are 0. I want to say as long as these are both 0, keep generating random numbers and make these the x speed and y speed. And eventually we'll find that we create speeds that are not 0. So this should prevent us from having any bad guys that don't move. So let's just see if that works. So I'm just going to refresh it a bunch of times. It looks like the bad guys are always moving now. Sweet. Okay, so we have none of those bad guys that are stuck. All right, next up, what I would like to do is I'd like to avoid creating a bad guy on top of the player, because I think that that can be a really bad experience for the person playing the game. So I'm going to do something really similar to this, which is I'm going to say, try to create x and y coordinates. Now, we run into a possibility where we might create a bad guy that's on top of the player, which will end the game immediately, which feels kind of unfair if I'm the player. I'm like, wow, that sucks. They just created the bad guy right on top of me. I didn't get a chance to avoid them. So what I'm going to say is, well, the distance between our player so get the player's x and y coordinates for, oh, this shouldn't be get distance. This should be get distance, right? Let me just see. Where is get distance? There it is. Okay, get distance. So we need x, y1, x2, y2. Okay. So get the distance between the player and the x and y coordinates that were generated here. And so while that distance is less than, I don't know, what seems fair? I want them to appear like at least 100 pixels away. While that distance is less than 100, try again. Generate different x and y coordinates. And what this should do is it should guarantee that each new bad guy, well, let me just finish typing. It should generate that each new bad guy, or it should guarantee that each new bad guy is at least 100 pixels away. So the way that it works is it generates a random number for x and y. Then we get the distance between the player and those x and y coordinates. And if the distance is less than 100 pixels, it will generate new ones. 100 might be a little too much, actually. I'm going to say if it's less than 80 pixels, generate new x and y coordinates. And it will keep doing that until it finds x and y coordinates that are not on top of the player, that are at least 80 pixels away. So let's run this. Player is not defined. I keep making this mistake. This should be player info. All right, so now it should basically be impossible. Whoa, that one was close. Okay, that felt a little dangerous here. But basically now it should never be able to create a bad guy on top of me, which will make me as a player feel a lot better about the game that it's not cheating. So obviously there's a lot of places that we can go with this. You can make different styles of bad guys. You can make bad guys that move with different patterns. You can make the bad guys bounce off of the walls. You could create an HP bar or an HP counter like the score counter that keeps track of your hit points and make it so that instead of killing you, it just removes some hit points until you get down to 0 hit points. You could also have extra lives. There's so many things that you could add to this, But for now, we've got a pretty functional game that increases in difficulty as we improve, and it's actually kind of fun to play. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the game that you're making. See you in class.